Hello, and welcome to another Tech Collector. Today's episode is another one of those microphone tests. This time we have two large condenser microphones to look at. The CAD e100s and the Lewitt LCT 440 Pure. Kind of a mouthful there, but they look fairly similar, but they are very different in price and really sound when you get down to it. Both of them come with a very nice kit. The shock mounts for both of them, I think, are above and beyond what we typically see, especially in this price point for microphones. They both work really well in doing that. Obviously, the CAD has a few more bells and whistles, and the Lewitt is very basic, but it's a very nice kit for someone to look at getting into podcasting and or YouTube videos. What we're going to do today is kind of compare both of them, just like we did on the last video, which was the Shure SM7b, the Techzone Audio Stellar X2 Vintage, and the Aston Audio Origin, which I really liked. I think it's a very nice microphone. I think they're all, when you're in this price range, I guess the low mid-range price, a lot of them are very similar. Some of them do stand out in certain elements, and I think, the CAD sort of does that here. It has a wider bandwidth, I think, than a lot of them do, and it does really well in the low end of my voice. So just kind of look at both of them in this untreated room with a wall of glass kind of behind me here to see how they work in the real world, and they're going to be used both in the Mix Pre and the Rodecaster Pro to see how they might actually be used by people they're looking to maybe buy one of these. We'll start with what's in the packaging. The Lewitt comes with kind of the generic pleather envelope, which I guess is the same thing as the Techzone did. It has the magnetic pop-on pop filter. That's actually really nice. And then the shock mount actually has inside of it, you can't see it right here all that well, has actually the foam slide on as well, and the adapter for your microphone stand. And then, of course, we have our microphone with the ever important sign telling us which side is the front. Very impressive packaging. It's just your typical cardboard. Nice manual. It works for me. We'll talk a little bit about the stats for this guy. The Lewitt's a pretty small form factor when it really comes down to it. Mic enclosure is a zinc die cast, so it's fairly light, 310 grams. The diaphragm is a 3-micron gold sputtered mylar. With a polar pattern of cardioid. It's showing an equivalent noise level of 7 decibel self-noise, which is very good. The CAD e100s is also a condenser, but this one's a super cardioid, which I think might be a little bit better for my noisy environment. Sensitivity is -30 dB. Max SPL with the pad engage is 150 decibels. The self-noise, and this is their measured noise, is 3.7 decibel, which is fantastic if that is true. High pass is 80 hertz. Attenuator, the pad, is 10 decibels. And this one weighs almost double what the Lewitt does. So let's go ahead and get started the same way we did last time, hooked up to the Mix Pre 3. Today we have pop filters on both of them. I have the Stedman Pro Screen 101 on the CAD e100s, and I have the one that actually came with it, the nice little magnetic one that mounts directly to your shock mount on the Lewitt, which is actually pretty slick. It came with all of those, and they're actually really well engineered, and it really doesn't block any of your view. So I'm hoping it works really well, and I can continue using it that way. Between the two microphones here, the Lewitt really has no adjustments you can do on the mic. You can do a little bit on the e100s, and I have turned on the high pass filter just to try to minimize some of the noise here. We'll probably do a little bit of test of both, but the Lewitt is basically comes one way, and that's the way it works. So that's what we're doing here. So we'll get a little bit closer to the CAD and see what we have here for proximity effect. I think the CAD is pretty full-bodied. It's got a lot of low end, so the high pass filter turned on doesn't really impact me all that much. I think when I switch over to the Lewitt, we're a little bit more, we'll call it bandwidth limited. I don't think there's quite the range that we're getting out of the Lewitt, and that might just be my voice. Doesn't work well with it, but I'm not sure. When I'm hearing the two together, I'm hearing them sound a little bit different. They both sound good. I mean, they're both perfectly usable and probably better than what most people really even need, especially just do a podcast or YouTube or something along those lines. I don't know if either one of them is something that I would prefer over like the Origin from last week, or even the SM7b, which kind of does everything well. Doesn't really do anything to stand out, but it does everything well and you can always count on it. I think with both of them, right now we're basically just running flat, except for the high pass filter. I don't have any, I'm not doing anything in Audition, besides just matching the two channels, so that we can actually get them pretty well level matched between the two for comparison. And I've obviously been switching back and forth, so you can kind of see which one sounds like which, and kind of get a little bit of idea of what they do differently. I think last week I didn't hear as big of a difference between the mics as I do between these two. I'm hearing a pretty large difference, and that might be because I'm monitoring fairly loudly on, the JH Audio Laylas, which are fairly sensitive headphones. But I am hearing a bit different when I kind of switch back and forth. So maybe you're hearing the same thing on the video. So as the CAD E100s has had some issues with noise on several people's microphones, including Mike Delgadio over at Booth Junkie before he's got fixed on the second or third attempt. I wanted to go ahead and do kind of the silence test. My room is not silent. I don't have a mixing studio. I don't have a studio. So there will be some noise, but we'll see which one has the most self noise. Hopefully we'll be able to see that. I might amplify up the signal just a little bit just to see what they sound like. We'll start out with just bass noise, and then I'll show you some of the amplified noise that might be coming out from either one of these mics. So let's go ahead and be quiet for a bit. Okay, hopefully that was long enough. We'll see what that one sounds like. Okay, switching over to the typical podcasting setup, we're actually connected to the Rodecaster Pro and running through its typical setup, including some of the add-on features, just to see how that actually affects. We got the big bottom on, we got the oral exciter, some of those kind of things, to see how well they play in that environment and see how most of these are probably going to be used. I don't know if there's a lot of people using them for voiceover, but a lot of people are certainly going to be using them for podcasting and or YouTube videos. So we'll see how that works. So we're kind of bouncing back and forth between both of them. Again, when you go with the typical setup, it's basically the same cables. I still have the same pop filters on both of them. I haven't really taken those off. We can try it without those at some point, but just to kind of see where we are and what things are doing, as a typical podcast. I think in listening, I think there might actually be a little bit more self noise from the Lewitt, but I found the self noise from the CAD to be very good. You could definitely hear it, but I think a lot of that, because you can even hear conversations in the background because I have such a terrible setup here. A lot of that was actually just the noise. It wasn't actually the self noise of the microphone. I just don't have a good setup for recording and getting that kind of noise measured, but I certainly didn't have any problem with background noise that I thought throughout the entire recording from either one of them. I was kind of worried the CAD E100s might have some issues because so many people have talked about that, but really nothing whatsoever to complain about there. When we talk a little bit about the packaging, we kind of saw it back in the beginning, but I think both of them come with everything that you need. I think the mounts for both, the shock mounts, are actually better than what you typically get with a microphone. A lot of the universal ones, including the one that came with the Origin that isn't technically universal but just slips a lot, and I'm not really all that fond of it. Really don't do much for me. But both of these, the one from the CAD is kind of strange, just how it sets up, but it works really well. I have no issues whatsoever with that. And the one that actually comes to the Lewitt, I think is really slick for what it is, especially with this little pop-on guy here. I mean, try not to make too much noise, but there's kind of a little slide on, magnetically pops on there. So you have that pop filter that really doesn't take up a lot of room on the desktop, and it basically just blends in with the mic. Rode has a few that are like that, but this is the first one that I've used. I think sound quality is good for both. What I hear is, the Lewitt I just don't think has, maybe it just doesn't have as much of the low end that it's picking up, but it seems like it is bandwidth limited. It's more in the mid-range and not getting a whole lot of the tops or bottoms compared to the CAD. I'll bring in a few samples just from the last video to show you the SM7b, the Origin, and I think we also used the vintage Stellar X2 Vintage. We tested that one as well in the last one. I think from the last video, I think I like the Origin, the sound quality the most, and really the looks. I think it's a pretty good looking mic. But when I listen to them right now, I think the CAD might have it a bit beat on vocals. Obviously, the CAD's not going to be great for a lot of things that the Origin might be great for. It does actually have the pad setting, so you can record instruments. You can put it up in front of a drum set or a guitar cabinet or whatever you want to do, which is kind of cool. The Lewitt, like I said, is very basic, but it is also half the price, so you kind of expect that to be the case. So before we get into kind of the final of which one I actually prefer, which I'm not sure there's going to be an easy choice, let's just go back and listen to the three from the previous video. When I get in closer a little bit to the SM7B, I think the sound does get quite a bit better. The same with the Stellar. It's a pretty good sound right up front. When you get farther back, you just get more room noise and more ambiance, we'll call it. And a little bit of the same with the actual Origin. The Origin, I think, maybe does a bit better in not losing your voice qualities, but it does bring in more noise when you're farther away from it. So you guys have heard them all 5 of the currently tested ones that I'm looking at, and they kind of are representative of what everybody's using across YouTube and on the podcast world. I think the most expensive is the CAD. And then we go a little bit down for the Shure SM7b. And then we have a lot of them kind of in the same range, the Origin, the Lewitt, and the cheapest of them all, the Stellar X2 Vintage. But they're all very good at what they do. I mean, they're all perfectly capable of doing what we need them to do. It's really up to you what you think sounds the best. With my voice, I would probably lean towards either the CAD or the Origin, really. The SM7B, I think, is a good all-around do everything, but it just doesn't do much for my voice. But, that's really what we have. So let me know below in the comments, what do you guys think is the best of the 5 that we've done in these last 2 videos? What sounds best, for this type of environment, very noisy, conference calls going on behind me, all these kind of fun things that I deal with here. What do you think sounds the best? And we hope to see you on the next one, and maybe we'll have some more microphones to look at, or I think we do have some really nice high-end headphones coming up in the very near future. Thanks a lot. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.